That is front and center because it has to be. There's a lot of energy around AI today. I think it's been around long enough that I think you see some early returns of early adopters, and the results are mixed. Even I would say security first thought in how you develop your technology roadmap, you're falling short because it's really not if you're going to have an event, it is when. If you think it's expensive to implement AI in an appropriate security posture, just wait till you see the cost of not doing it.
Joining me today, I have Dean Gartelos. He helps leaders make smart technical decisions and leaves people better than he found them. And there's a lot of conversation we can have around this, so I feel like Dean is the right person to go over those things now. Before we get into it, Dean, can you tell me a little bit more about your journey? How did you start and how did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate you having me on. Enjoy these kinds of conversations. So really looking forward to this. So, it's been an interesting path, not so much windy as it is boring, maybe. I spent almost 18 years with the phone company, started out of college as a temp and grew up through that organization. By the time I left, I ran part of the pricing and offer management organization with responsibility for the public sector. So much experience with the federal government, state, municipal, and local, and education, I've been involved in some really cool things over the years, and took an opportunity to make a change, and really with the encouragement of my bride, who's much wiser than I, took some time to decide what I was going to do. She said, who gets an opportunity to just take a breath and decide, right? And do you want to open a restaurant? Do you want to? Because we talked about that over the years. Get into coaching. Lots of different things we've talked about. So just take your time and plan it out. And while I did that, um, I thought I wanted to land in a graduating organization, an enterprise, that needed to develop a team like the one I came from, that I'd been part of developing over the years, my corporate life. And while I was kind of looking for that, I had a colleague reach out and say, "Hey, I know you're taking some time off. Have you ever thought about doing some consulting? I have somebody that probably could use some help." And I thought, well, sure, why not, right? What's the harm in that? And so, worked with them, found an opportunity like the one I thought I was looking for, met with them, interviewed, and really hit it off with the executive team. And you know, well, they called and said, "Gosh, we'd like you to come in and figure it out." My heart sank, and that was not the reaction I was expecting. And so talked to my bride and said, Dawn, they called, they want to make this go. And she said, "Oh, that's great." And I said, I don't think I want to do that. I think I want to do this other thing, right? This consulting path. And she was so funny. She said, "Well, I was wondering when you were going to see it." And I'm like, "Well," she said, "that's the only thing you've been excited about and passionate about over the last several months, right?" Because I've done a few different things in that path. And I said, "Well, you could have told me." And she said, "No, I can't. You have to know what you want." And she's absolutely right. And I met with them and politely declined. And they knew I kind of was very open in that process, and I was at a fork in the road, right? Am I going to go corporate, or am I going to go on my own journey? And so they weren't shocked, and they kind of said, "Yeah, we kind of saw that too, but we thought we could make it work." Um, and so that was July of 17. August of 17, Western Skies Consulting, powered by OTG, became my real job, and I haven't looked back. And they say, if you find something you love, you never really work a day, and I have found that to be extremely true. It just doesn't feel like work, and I've been involved in some cool things over the last 7.5 years, eight and a half years now. And it's good stuff, and it's very freeing. And I don't mean in the sense most people think working for themselves is. And I mean, certainly schedule wise and all those things, but that can be double edged, as any entrepreneur knows.
Yeah.
But it's very freeing because my life is aligned now in a way that didn't feel possible in a corporate life. Not because the company was bad, it was great, in all the ways that corporations are great. But, as you get to know me, my only real goal is to leave you better than I found you. without regard to whether we do business. Because, if I do my job correctly and I can articulate what I do and the value I bring, if there's a need, that business that shows up, right? Because that's how business happens, right? But if I can help in some other way, um, I've helped people find jobs over the years. My network's pretty broad. I'm not a recruiter. All the way down to like how I interact with folks on the daily, right? Just be kind, spread light wherever you can, and it's a much happier existence, right? My old corporate job, I had to be the adult in the pool, and I don't miss that. So now I help people however I find them. If it happens to be professionally, so much the better. I mean, certainly I need business. That I never said money's not important. I think it's very important. Our relationship with money matters. What we do with it, how we approach it, all matters. But it's not the most important thing in the world. And so that's kind of my path. And it's not super exciting. It's not fraught with adventure. It's fraught with maybe awareness and awakening. And my journey has been one to challenge myself to think more broadly than I have in the past, and to be better than yesterday.
It's a it might sound like a very simple path, but there's a lot of probably a lot of decisions that you had to make in those moments where you were between that fork in the road, like that you kind of skip over it as if it was like a decision. Like that was probably like turmoils and planning and trying to see the future, and you're struggling with that uncertainty. What do I do? And I say that because it sounds like it was a straightforward, but I'm pretty sure in those moments it wasn't a easy decision.
You've read it right. For sure.
Now, my question around that is, what was that? Because you said your heart wasn't into it. What was that feeling that you're like, I definitely want to do consulting? What made it more concrete?
It's a function of, I think, that unconstrained ability to interact, to work, to improve. And my journey consulting has been fabulous because I've done a few different types of consulting over the years. What I do now, I still, in terms of management consulting, helping companies with strategy and some cultural things and price and business business cases. But then the technology consulting piece I enjoy because it's always fresh and it's new, and I really do love that. And it's an impactful endeavor. One of the things that I always, my old corporate life, because of the nature of the business, right, with the client, we did a lot of things in the support of the warfighter from a communication standpoint. And I used to tell my team, right, we're Rosie the Riveter. We get these things right because they matter. And I always wondered how I'd feel putting in that level of effort for like the barbershop or the restaurant or whatever it was, because somehow from the outside it felt less important. And what I've come to appreciate is that it's equally important. It's not life or death in the literal sense, but these businesses are the lifeblood of America and the economy. And the way I'm able to help them succeed is all part of feeding that, right? Rising tides lifts all boats. So the more folks we can help and that can help us, the better off we'll all be. And that is a non-trivial, impactful thought to me. And it provides meaning through what we do.
It's evident that the purpose and the meaning behind what you can do, the character that you have, is achievable through the consulting, not through the corporate world. And it became that was very clear in your mind when you're making those decisions. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Western Skies Consulting. Tell me a little bit more. What do you do when you're going through consulting? What kind of consulting? What do people expect you to do when they work with you?
So Western Skies Consulting is my firm. I'm actually a senior partner and part of the management leadership at OTG Consulting, which is a consortium of folks just like me that are former technology executives that instead of running the carriers, now we help our clients make technology decisions. And so what does that mean, right? When I engage with a client, it is all about helping them make better, smarter, faster decisions to yield business outcomes that they are wanting. The antiquated days and model of sellers and creating fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and quota-driven activities, and And just all of those tactics that I think people have come to accept as a quote necessary evil are completely unnecessary. And so I start with the client in mind. What is everything working as well as you'd like? Do you have a project you're working on or coming up? Do you have a problem you're trying to solve? Right? I try to understand the business need before I get to a solution path. Right? Sellers of these companies, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's the model that's existed for years in every field of play. But they have a quota, they have a product or product set that they are incented to sell. So their job is to make it fit whatever client they come across. Throw it at the wall, see what sticks. Right? Further, they're incented because of the way they're compensated to get you to pay the highest amount you're willing to pay for that product or service. Not gouging or anything unethical, although I suppose that happens. But the market's a range of prices, and the higher in that range they get you to pay, the quicker they retire their quota, hit their bonus, take their kid to Disneyland or whatever it is they need to do, right? Well, that just stems from this vendor capability view, product view of the world and of the client, right? That saying, if you're a hammer, then you try to find everything and make it look like a nail.
Mhm.
Well, we just flip that model around. Take a client requirement view of the market and distill the market down to only those products and services that fit, right? Get alignment between requirements and capabilities, and then curate that experience for my clients, silence the noise, help negotiate, bring multiple options to the table. And in that competition, everybody wins. And what I mean by that is, right, the first win is a client gets a solution that is well suited to their needs, right? Implementation lines up, right? Feels good, goes smoothly. They get a great price because companies love to say things like, we won't lose on price. I help them test that theory because we bring the competition to the table. That's win number one for the client. Win number two is for the service provider, right? They find a client that's actually a good fit for them, which means their service delivery, as it's intended, meets their need, creates a happy client. Okay. They get new revenue. And the question I get often is, well, don't they have to price you in? You're not an employee. Doesn't that add to the what I'm going to pay? And it's really the opposite that's true. Right. If you think about this model with the company that I do business with and bring to the table, if they bring a sales guy, they've got a salary they're paying, they've got benefits, they've got infrastructure and CRMs and funnel reviews and all the things administratively they have to do to make sure they're getting money out of their investment, and they pay them a commission on the deal. So those companies just pay me a commission like they would their own sales guy, but the rest of that is all avoidable cost. And so I'm just a variable cost of success. So they love me in that regard. I'm actually a lower cost of acquisition for these organizations. Right. So that's win number two is for the service provider, a client that fits, a lower cost of acquisition. Now, the win number three is kind of for all of us involved, right? I'm there, I get paid, right? I get my commission. That's part of my win. But then that kind of wrapper around that entire thing, because unlike a sales guy who's on to the next deal because they have to be because their boss is breathing down their neck, I'm still there in parallel for the experience for my client, right? I expect my service providers to do a great job, and they do. But if for some reason something goes pear-shaped, I'm always there. A client can reach out to me. I've got a bat phone to the leadership of these organizations. And I don't have to use it very often, but where I've had, it's been to great effect because unlike a salesperson, if they don't do a good job, I don't bring them to the table anymore. It's that simple. So, I mean, that's really the model. That's the engagement. And it's a meet with the client where they are. And there's more to it than that. There's something to simplification, right? I talked about that antiquated fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's garbage, right? I think people and organizations are motivated by two things: either fear or faith or love, depending on how you want to talk about it. And I favor the latter because, and that manifests its way through education, through simplification. I think sellers, in creating that uncertainty and that doubt is really around trying to manufacture value. If you don't understand it, then you really need me to help you understand it. Well, that's ridiculous, right? Now, there's certainly complicated aspects to technology implementations, whether you're talking about networks or artificial intelligence or cybersecurity and all the things, right? There are some complexities there, but they're not unconsumable. And and really, from a leadership standpoint, you don't need to understand all the zeros and ones. You need to understand the important aspects of it. And I bring that clarity, and I help service providers bring that clarity to my clients, so it removes that uncertainty and that doubt.
When we're looking at a partnership where you are looking out for the best interest on both sides, because to me that's how it sounds like it works for the vendor because you have the right client as opposed to anyone, and for the client is the right solution as opposed to any solution driven by faith or fear or whatever someone tries to, like you said, kind of create that value proposition artificially. Do you get more questions around AI nowadays or
Oh,
AI
for sure.
implementations? What are some of the conversations around that when you have with companies when they want to implement these technologies?
Yeah, I think that is front and center because it has to be. There's a lot of energy around AI today. I think it's been around long enough that I think you see some early returns of early adopters, and the results are mixed. And the reason that is because, you have maybe a misalignment of expectations and capability. I mean, that's really what any of these technology decisions that companies make when they don't turn out how they'd hoped. It's because there's a misalignment somewhere in that process. And so, I have a client-centric view of the world. I mean, yeah, I'm looking out for the vendor and that I bring the right answer to the table for them, right? If they're the right answer. But it all stems from that client need, that client requirement. And so the discussions around AI, when a client says, hey, how should we be leveraging AI? And I say, well, boy, that means a lot of different things, right? There's a couple of different point solutions that are agentic that can maybe take phone calls or assist with accounts payable or accounts receivable, right? There's some other aspects that can create some efficiency from a reporting standpoint, or there's orchestration of the entire enterprise, right? Bringing disparate systems together in a meaningful way and creating a dashboard that allows for line of sight into business activity. So let's talk about what you really want out of AI. Or did your board say, hey, we heard about AI, go sprinkle some of that in, right? And you can do that, right? But it's like any other technology. If you don't understand the business needs you're solving, then it's a clanging cymbal, right? It's just not. Um, I'm not a technologist for the sake of it. I am for the sake of the client and the benefit that it brings.
Now, what those conversations have to be difficult when someone, like you said, like sprinkle some AI. How do you deter someone to say, look, you may not need AI, you might need automations or software development, which is not AI in this case. How do you go about those conversations?
Well, I think, to be honest, there's almost none of those activities you mentioned, whether it's software development or automation, that doesn't have an AI element to it today.
Yes.
Um, I mean, I guess that's not entirely true. There is some old school development. There are some automations, RPA, right, that are mechanical, not intelligent. So I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think it's back to the business outcome. And yeah, sometimes you got to save a client from themselves. Um, Also, sometimes you need to help them minimize their risk if they're committed to doing something that's, um, a few degrees off point of maybe what the best answer is, and help mitigate and bring any of the risks to light and have that informed conversation. And that's why we're part of the benefit of that OTG folks like me and Western Skies. What we do for folks is we're that independent third party vendor neutral voice, because the best salespeople will tell a client, no, you don't really need this. There's not enough of those in the world. And so while sales makes their pitch, or while the client is pursuing something that maybe isn't the exact best fit, I always challenge them to say, hey, can I bring you something else in addition? It's not going to hurt. There's no obligation, no cost to do this, right? And so I help bring, I think, additional data to the table, and that's how it kind of gets them off that point. Um, at the end of the day, dollars matter a lot to organizations. And so if you could tie things back to how it impacts them from a budget standpoint, that's another way. Sometimes it's a cultural conversation, right? They might have the perfect tool, but culturally they're just not ready for that. And how do you map from here to there to help the organization be ready for a change in process of that magnitude that provides some automation or other aspects that takes people out of their daily habit that they've had for however many years, right? And so that's all part of that process, part of that journey, and part of the role that I play. I end up doing a lot of coaching in what I do just by nature of the conversations I have with leadership.
To when we're talking about leadership and all these processes, because it's a new thing, right? What are or how much do you get involved when it comes to like change management? Because someone might want to introduce something, or someone want
Yeah.
to switch, I don't know, from Azure to Google Cloud or
Sure.
AWS. Like I'm using like simple examples. How much do you get involved in that change management process?
It varies, not deeply, not in a I'm in a meeting with all the employees way. I am from a sometimes a coaching aspect, as I mentioned. I have resources that specialize in that sort of change management that I can introduce to a client that really is their play. And by the way, that's the brilliance and the expertise that I bring isn't being an expert in all aspects of every single thing in technology and business. My particular expertise is knowing which experts to bring to leverage for my client's benefit. And so those resources fit into that way, just like I would bring the appropriate AI option or the appropriate unified communications option, right? That's how I interact in that space because I do have a very broad network of very capable companies and consultants and in different areas of play. Cyber security insurance, great. I have the perfect guy for that. Need to talk about ERP and benefits and those? Yeah, let's work through that. Right. There's a lot of ways that I do this. And then the other magic or beauty of what I do is, by the way, I'm free to my clients. I don't charge them for what I do because I'm compensated by the service provider. So, right, what's the barrier to entry there? What's the risk of working to me to let me help? Right? It's not. It's just I'm not free. I'm just free to the client. And that's an important distinction. I'm pretty open with that conversation because once business people understand how the money flows, they're ready to engage in that manner, right? Back to creating clarity, not uncertainty.
That's right. Now, if we're going down the path where someone reaches out to you and they have ideas, they want to ask you some questions, and they're bouncing off some ideas off you, and you bring in solutions. You mentioned the cybersecurity part. How much is that top of mind nowadays for people where they are like they're implementing AIs, they're changing their processes dramatically? How much do you see conversations around cybersecurity and how do they go about?
Oh, it's critical. I think if you don't have a security thought, and maybe even I would say security first thought in how you develop your technology roadmap, you're falling short because it's really not if you're going to have an event or if you're going to be, have an attack, maybe not an event if you have the appropriate measures in place. It is when. And the mitigation of that after the fact is far more costly, right? If you think it's expensive to implement AI in an appropriate security posture, just wait till you see the cost of not doing it. And so those are common aspects of the conversation that I have. And by the way, it's funny how people think they're secure or they think they're not. Sometimes I've had experience where I go into a client and we're talking about connectivity and I say, "What's your security posture? How are you, how's that set up?" They say, "Oh, no, I'm all good." And I say, "Oh, great. That's good. What do you like? What is your solution?" They say, "Oh, we've got Kaspersky." Now, if you're in the space, they're literally a state-run bad guy at this point in the market. There was a point that they weren't that, but they are today, right? And so I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. And so I don't create a sense of urgency for my clients. I try to match theirs with a notable exception, something that is truly an operational risk like that was. And so you see me hop up and down, it's for good cause. You had to get them migrated because having the appropriate team in place for security isn't a nice to have any longer. It is absolutely a must have. Otherwise, you risk the entire enterprise. And that is not hyperbole. There's a stat somewhere, and I don't remember the exact percentage, but it's a higher percentage than anybody wants of companies that really truly go out of business if they have a cyber event.
Hmm. Now, what do you say, Dean, to people that are saying, regardless if I have it, I will get attacked and I will get hacked because much larger organizations than me do get attacked and get hacked. So I just kind of deal with the aftermath as opposed to trying to prevent this because I feel like it's close to impossible to prevent it.
Well, I can appreciate that, and it lines up with what I just said, right? It's not if, it's when.
Mhm.
But the truth is, if you were like, it's gonna happen anyway, I guess I shouldn't worry about it. Well, like, do you lock your home at night, right? Do you do you take safeguards with your family? Do you have health insurance? Because yeah, you're probably gonna get sick. Right? They're similar thoughts, and you can mitigate the impact of an event by having the appropriate security partner helping manage and secure your environment. And it's the difference of an inconvenience to a world-ending event for your company. And so, yeah, if there's an event and you have an appropriate security partner, and yeah, maybe it'll disrupt operations for a short period of time, but it's not shutting things down. It's not ransomware for a number that you may or may not be able to pay. You have cyber insurance? Great. In the words of that cyber insurance policy are measures that they expect you to have in place. If you do not, that insurance will not pay, right?
Nice.
So, there's aspects of this that it's not as simple as, well, if it's going to happen anyway, I guess I'll just write it out when it does, right? That's not a responsible way to manage an organization. And I think the larger the organization, the larger stakes, the more lives are impacted and livelihoods. And so you don't have the luxury as a leader to be loose with those types of decisions.
I like the way that you are positioning it to say like there's a difference between inconvenience and a company ending event. Like if you have the mindset of it's gonna happen, why pay so much money? I'll deal with it when it happens. I'll try to put some conspiracy or something like that. You're trying to say that there's a difference between okay, this is a painful thing, we're gonna go through it a month and we're good, or billions of dollars are lost. Company ending event is it's a very different kind of scenario. So that's where those things are in place. Maybe you are not gonna 100% prevent it, but you will mitigate it to the degree where it becomes just an inconvenience versus like a horrible, horrible company ending event. Now, well, in that conversation, you mentioned Kaspersky. I've heard that one from like a long, long time ago, but are there some, let's not call them bad actors, but let's just say they're not good, but they're like really popular and people still use them?
I don't know. I mean, that's the one that jumps to mind. I think if you're looking at any antivirus as your sole security position, you're missing the boat. Okay, that is inherently reactive. It is relying on somebody else having a problem and it being identified and them adding that problem into your product that's trying to protect your environment. There are far more sophisticated and capable ways to secure an environment. And so, like, I wouldn't, if somebody asked me what's the best antivirus, I would say have a conversation with, let's talk about security in aggregate, because it's not about antivirus anymore. That it just, if that is akin to doing nothing, honestly. I mean, yeah. I mean, it just is. Now, there's a few that are good, right? That are for small and call it consumer and stuff like that, because they have some, they've built in some responsiveness, not some proactive, not reactive. But the truth is, man, if you're a company, you really do need truly a managed security solution. Now, how far you go up that stack, and what types of, how deep's the moat and how high's the wall, right? That's a different conversation. But having to have those things are important.
Interesting. Now, when you're when you're having these conversations with the clients and you've met people from all kinds of walks in life, what are some of the traits that you've seen in good leaders when they manage their company, when they talk with you?
Yeah. I think there's some commonalities, and in those commonalities revolve around, I'll call it authenticity, because it's not really the attribute. Now, there are some attributes that are better than others, right? Um, Openness and the ability to listen and some of those behaviors, right? But authenticity is the starting point, because you can only be who you are. And so if you know who you are, right? Know thyself. Um, then you can apply, that's the foundation. Then leaders, they do have to have a sense of openness that always doesn't always look the same way in different personalities, right? They have to have a sense of vision. That vision is articulated different ways depending on the personality, right? But those coming right? Some openness, the ability to have a vision, right, that you can execute against, right? Now, I would say, and this is maybe just because it's my style, but right, the ability of a leader to bring diverse thought into their leadership group, right? Be willing to hear opinions that are not to have healthy discourse in debating and making decisions, right? Those are some of the best leaders that I find, with the ability to also say, I've heard all this, I am the boss, and here's the path forward, right? It's not about building consensus, it's about making informed decisions, right? These companies, it's not a democracy, right? There's a hierarchy in place for a reason, but it doesn't have to feel draconian, right? It's not dictatorial, right? So those are the attributes from my perspective, right? In a willingness to learn, to always be learning, right? I think the day somebody says, I know it all, they're cooked.
That's right. Because it's an ever-changing world, not just in business, but in many factors. So we have to keep adapting and changing and getting, trying out new things. And like you said, having those conversations where it's against your beliefs, it's against what you kind of thought was the right thing. I think it was a fantastic example in the Lean Startup, in that book, where the guy is like, if I just asked my clients, not my engineers, I would have saved millions of dollars because I was engineering solutions that no one needed. And once I had the conversations with my clients, I understood exactly what I had to do, and that was far better as an experience.
That's funny, and that's exactly the approach, right? That I take. That small example is an important one because back to, I don't lead with technology. I don't say, do you need this? It's because my client is the company. I think every company could benefit from that approach, whether it's literally asking your client or other ways to get a client perspective on what's needed.
Now, one of the philosophies that you have, that we talked about this early on before we started recording, was you've built all of this with just referrals and organic. No paid ads, no outreach, none of that, just through networking, referrals, and organic. Walk us through your process. How does someone do that in today's time, where everybody's blasting emails? They're saying you got to run automations, you got to pay 5-10K to Meta to run all of these ads. How does someone do it? How does someone grow through referrals and organically?
I think it's changed over the last several years, many years. I think LinkedIn was, and maybe still can be, a way to network. It's what it's made for inherently. I think the tools have rendered, and the noise that is now there is hard. And so I think it's back to, I use the word authenticity. I think any growth that you have has to be because you're yourself, and whatever the tools are. So I think social networking is a good way. It really can be, but I had somebody coin the phrase, and I love it. It's not mine, but I say it because it's such a true thing. Nobody wants to be pitch slapped, right? And how often is a phone call come, or a message or an email that is just a hard pitch, right? It's like, nobody likes that. I think people that do it don't even like it. But honestly, I've probably done that in my life, because you feel like you got to get the words out. If they could just understand what you could do and all the good things, And so I'd say stay away from that, right? The way I've been able to do it is, first, my network. There's a reason every company that you hire, that hires you, or every business you start, they say, look at your network, go talk to them, and start there. And that's what I do. And that's what people should do, right? You already have credibility. And an opportunity to prove further that credibility, right? Credibility is not something that you have and maintain forever. It's something that you earn and must continue to earn. So, right, be worth the trust that they give in working with you. Trustworthy, right? Be trustworthy. So networking, the first thing, right? Talk to your network. From there, you get clients. As you get clients, ask those clients if anybody they know would be happy, would benefit from what you do. Right? It's that, These things are old, right? These concepts, but they're really true, right? They refer you to somebody because you did a good job for them. You've earned their trust, right? You can maintain that credibility. So they're willing to bring you to somebody else. Just keep doing a great job every time you do it, right? So that's one path, right? And that client referral is different in some ways than a referral from a colleague or somebody else that knows you. And I that's another key element of how I'm able to grow, right? But a client referral is almost like golden because it's somebody saying, I've trusted this individual enough to help me that I think you should trust them too, right? So that's one. The other is a referral from a colleague or from somebody else. And if you have a referral program where you pay them or you don't, that doesn't really necessarily matter because that's not the defining element of a referral. That might drive activity, might have somebody be willing to make more referrals, but a referral from somebody that knows you, that trusts you, it's similar to a client referral, but the difference is there's no specific firsthand experience. So I'm saying, hey, I think you should work with Zipco. I know him, I trust him, I think he's a great guy. I've heard he does great things. That's different than I think you should work with him because, boy, he really helped me clean up my technology stack, right? Two different kinds of things. Now, I will say, I will ask folks when they make a referral for me, I'll say, guys, go one step further and say, by the way, I'd really like your feedback on what that experience is like with Dean. Right? Because two things happen there. One, I really want that feedback to loop in because if somebody's not happy, I sure would like to know about that, right? But also, it frees up their relationship with whomever they're going to refer in to be able to tell them, boy, it just didn't go great. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. But a lot of people they'll be too busy for that meeting because they don't want to risk the relationship that they have with somebody to say, boy, you said Dean was good, but he just isn't, right? So it'd be easier to never talk to Dean because I don't want to wreck that, right? So open that feedback loop so somebody's free to say, boy, that was terrible. You maybe shouldn't take them anywhere anymore. Now, I've never had that happen. I don't expect I ever will. But the ability for that to happen, I believe, is all important.
Oh.
Okay. There's one more thing that I think I've seen and I'm learning, and it's in addition to the outreach and social media and the networking. I think you have to be engaged from a networking standpoint. Okay, that authenticity that you bring as a human and as a business person, there's no other way to share that other than with interaction. And there's different ways to have that interaction, right? There's one-on-one networking events. There's one-to-many if you have an opportunity to host an event, right? Speak on a topic that people want to listen to. There's different ways to reach folks, but all of those really get back down to, in my opinion, that being able to share your authentic self, your message on how you might benefit an organization with what you do, and then from there, if there's a need, things can line up and transact. Does that make sense or help?
It does make sense, and the center of the whole thing, to me, it sounds like it's authenticity and trustworthiness, transferring that trust, building the trust, having feedback around how that works so they can strengthen that trust and be authentic and be yourself. To me, it sounds like that's one of the core factors of how you've been able to keep growing organically, networking events or through referrals without needing to spend anything on outreaches or paid ads or anything like that. Now, Dean, if someone listens to this whole conversation is like, I need someone to clean up my tech stack, how do people get a hold of you to work with you?
Thanks. Easy, hopefully super easy. Succeedwithdean.com. And that's right. Find me there. You've got access to my calendar there. You can see some of the other things about me. LinkedIn, fine. Always reach out to LinkedIn. I'm there too. But that's the best way. And I try to make it easy for people to find me. And truly, if it's not something I can help with, maybe I know somebody who can. And so, I'm always happy to have conversations, even if it doesn't end up in business, because I think you never know where the road goes, and you never know who you might meet, and you can never know enough good people. So please reach out, and I'm happy to talk and learn about you and your business. And if you think I can help you somehow, happy to do so.
Appreciate that, Dean. Thank you so much for the time today. You showed us a lot of different ways of doing not just business, but looking at technology, looking at AI, building relationships, and I really appreciate the time you took to share all those things with us. So thank you for everything, and I wish you all the success.